Hello and welcome to our Deal Makers series, who we've got a player agent special. We're going to get to the player agents who hold the most power in the trade negotiations. The boys here have got some interesting stories. My name's Jay Clark. Hello to you, Johnny Ralph.
Hello.
Scotty Gullan, great to have you. Now, let's be honest. Sometimes the player agents can wield a bigger stick than others, depending on the power of the stable and which other players are in their grouping. Scotty, do any examples come to mind?
Well, there's
in some tense negotiations.
Trade period last year, we were all at Marvel Stadium for that last half hour, and there was yelling. You could hear yelling through the walls. Like, oh, that sounds familiar. Paul Connors and Robert Eurasio, who the two of the big players, they had Jake Stringer and Essendon were dragging their feet, We all knew this was going to get done to GWS. Anyway, it got down to literally the last couple of minutes, and the point was made. They also manage LDU, Luke Davies-Uniacke, and every club wanted to get in front of him to sell their soul. And Essendon were told quite clearly, you stuff this up, you're not getting in front of LDU. And even when it went through, you're still not getting in front of LDU. So that just shows that, of course, clubs are aware that if you want to do this deal here, you might be a chance to do the deal over there with the same manager. You got to, a bit of love goes a long way.
And we've all seen that those deals have fallen over at times. So you could say, why is he going to do it? Well, you know what? Because Jake Stringer might have had to finish his career at Essendon. Paul Connors is famous for that. We were there again at Marvel Stadium, and he was strutting. He was, walking up and down outside the concourse when the Dylan Shield deal was about to go through. Might have gone through at a minute to midnight or a minute after midnight. Some of these deals get conveniently, the paperwork gets lodged for them. Yeah, and even, Paul, again, a really good example of an agent at work when the deal with Dan Houston looked like it had broken apart on the Monday night before that deadline, got all of the all of the club representatives into his office and basically said to them on a Tuesday, we're not leaving here until we get a deal done. It was a really complicated deal, and it was a deal that Paul basically had his fingerprints all across, and it allowed his client in Dan Houston to get to Collingwood when a lot of the legwork had been done, and the big bopper in Paul Connors said, I'll get this one done, boys.
Often clubs need that. You know what clubs are like. They can't see a deal.
Yeah.
I think there's only a couple. Maybe Stephen Wells, the legendary Geelong. Like a win. Most of his deals, you could say, each party walks away with as much as we get. There's other clubs who just can't handle that. So you need a Paul Connors or a Tom Petroro or someone like that to get a whiteboard out and go, boys, this is how it's going to move. Because they know all the salary cap, the draft picks. They know it as much as the clubs do. Often it needs them to point out, you're being stubborn, but this can happen. And we've got to grease the wheels here.
The Tom Petroro deal, of course, back in the day when Lachie Neale went all the way across the world, and we saw Jesse Hogan go one way. Stephen May, that pick six deal went across the land. That was because a lot of those clients were TLA clients, and so Tom Petroro rolled his sleeves up there and got that deal done, and it was a win-win for everyone apart from Fremantle, who gave up a top 10 ping for Jesse Hogan.
I think that deal broke completely down on the Friday, and then Peter Bell, the former Fremantle football manager, basically said we're out, and things the wheels had come off the car at this point. Tommy Petroro from TLA steps in and then nuts out the 8-club super deal or whatever it was, and because he's an independent voice in the whole thing, he adds some independence and is able to evaluate it all correctly. So then Jesse Hogan, Steve May, Lachie Neale all find their homes, but sometimes these things can get really frosty. And I reckon the Geelong GWS negotiation over Jeremy Cameron was the frostiest of all time. I reckon people involved in that deal still haven't got over the grudges. They're still harbouring some emotion from it. In fact, I think it went over deadline. I think the clock stopped and they all both sat there and the deal hadn't been thrashed out yet. And for the next minute, the AFL basically said, let's pretend this never happened, nut this out so we can get this sorted. So I think that's one. I think the Dylan Shield deal was another one, Essendon and GWS. Jason McCartney, who's a tough negotiator, and Adrian Dodoro. I think Essendon had to sub Adrian Dodoro out of that, bring in Dan Richardson. So as that Essendon eventually handed over the 2 first-round picks for Dylan Shield. In the end, I think Dodoro will be vindicated. Dylan Shield hasn't delivered 2 first-round pick value on that. So he was hardline on that. Any examples of where sort of emotions have bubbled over that you guys can think of?
Well, Colin Young's an exceptional player manager, but he's also volatile, in the best possible way there. And so, he's had a lot of Barneys with clubs. And right now he's having the same sort of Barney with Darcy Cameron. He doesn't feel that his player's been valued. And so right now he's just holding off. And there's a lot of clubs that think he's an exceptional ruckman there. But, some of the tactics that these clubs use, sometimes it's frostiness. 5 days into a trade period, you say, well, what's the discourse? They say, we haven't spoken yet. So they're trying to, basically bluff each other further out. I think what Cullen's done really well at times is he's tried to get his players to a certain club 12 months out. He's well aware of someone like Rory Lobb, unlikely to get to that club, but he thinks if I can probably, put some burley into the water, 12 months down the track, I'll get my man there. So, yeah, not only clubs asking about players 12 months out, players are asking for a trade 12 months out when it's unrealistic, so they get there a year later.
And we're part of this game as well. I mean, we all get, the story about the agents are happy for us to say he wants X, or the rival agent will ring and say this is what's really happening. We get not used, but we are certainly part of this roller coaster that's influential in that a story comes out. That's going to help.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? How many clubs are interested in him? Multiple Melbourne clubs. Well, could you be more specific? And then that's the time when
he's
you really
been offered X.
All those things. So we of course wouldn't write that story unless we knew who those clubs are. But that is the real challenge, Clarkie.
I think I did a Dane Beams story when he was leaving Collingwood. So when he left from Collingwood to Brisbane the first time, Rodney Eade was football manager at the time, and a Backpage Herald Sun story. Collingwood had set a deadline, right? So this Friday, we need the deal done. The Dean Beans are not going to muck around for the next 2 weeks. We want the deal done. Friday deadline was the back page the headline story. I still remember Paul Connors calling me the next day. He was blindsided by the deadline thing and sort of said, I don't know anything about this deadline. This is bull dust or whatever. I'll show them a deadline. So fair to say the deadline didn't hold and it trickled onto the second week and Brisbane got their man. So there is always some shenanigans. Who are the best poker players? Who are the hard-ass negotiators? Because sometimes I look at Sam Power and the Western Bulldogs and Andrew Mackie at Geelong with Dom Ambrosio from Brisbane Lions. He is a smiling assassin because you got the two cameras on them and they're in their separate rooms, sitting at different tables, just scrolling through their phones, waiting for the other one to blink first. Who do you think, as a player manager, have been the most sort of difficult or toughest to deal with? Who drives the hardest bargain?
Well, he drove a really hard bargain last year, didn't he? And that was why it was interesting because we got Sam Power in one corner saying we want more than pick 17, and then we're all discussing
for Bailey Smith,
all discussing the reasons for it. In the end, they got a deal done. Wellesley actually went to Harvard and he did a deal maker's course, and he found that the best deals were done when both parties were happy. He must have forgotten that for a while because he didn't want to give up more than 17. In the end, there was some, it was a pick in the 40s that was thrown in. We saw Matt Kennedy also get to the Western Bulldogs, and Jack McRae was thrown in as well. But yeah, those blokes are pretty resolute and they got a pretty steely glare.
I think clubs, they know they have to be on good terms with Connors, Petro, the main hitters. I mean, there's no use carrying beef with these guys because, as we talked about, it'll come back and get you. So I think mostly across the board, it's the same heavy hitters each year because they've got the stars and they know which clubs and how everyone deals with it. They've all been around the block. I think it gets fiery in October in particular, but I think in the end, most deals get done now.
Certainly do. What about the Tim Kelly deal? What are your reflections on that one, John?
Well, I think Anthony Van der Millen, his manager, would probably realise that because he wasn't part of a massive stable and because he didn't have 10 players at Geelong, it probably delayed Tim getting back by a year. Now, in the end, the flip side was that what would have been maybe a 4 or 5 year deal on maybe 500 became 6 years on $1 million. Right. So he actually was Tim was actually advantaged by that. And what actually happened there was, what could have been, pick a first rounder turned into, I think it was 3 first rounders coming back, and they used that collateral at Geelong. That effectively became the Jeremy Cameron deal. So sometimes there's a bit of kismet or a bit of, happy circumstance there that actually helped everyone out, including Geelong and Tim Kelly. But I think if it was Paul Connors, he probably would have got his man Tim Kelly to West Coast a year before, given there were pretty compelling family reasons.
But I think Geelong knew Tim Kelly didn't want to go. The family reasons were legit, but they thought they'd put the resources, and across the board they thought for one more year they could keep it intact. It wasn't like it was urgent. Yes, there was clearly his wife wanted to go, his partner wanted to go, but they thought they could handle it, and Tim was saying all the right things like, I think I have to go, but, I can stay. And look what happened. He played great football, and then they got the best deal of all time, and he sadly hasn't played great football since then.
And it could have been the greatest deal of all time. She turned Tim Kelly into a free agent in Jeremy Cameron. As it turned out, it was 3 first rounders. I think Geelong got 2 back. So that's another illustration too of, rather than Geelong just saying about Jeremy Cameron, okay, you're going to match this deal, you're going to match this free agency bid, we won't have a crack at him. They said, is he worth 3 first rounders with 2 back? Absolutely. He wins on the premiership. All is good in the world, but it just shows there with Stephen Wells. Okay, he goes, righto, it's not the deal I want, it's the deal we have to get done, and we saw the result of it in the premiership.
Before we go, have you got a prediction on where Harley Reid lands? What do you think? Every club in the competition's got a level of interest. We know Geelong might be keen. Hawthorn, Richmond potentially. Have you got a gut feel?
I still think he's more likely to just get through to the third year. I've always felt like halfway through the year he was just really upset and really homesick. He's played better footy because he's got fitter. I think he's working on his routine a bit more over there, and sort of he's not being hounded by the media as much. I think there's more of a chance that he plays for the third year and then he gets
and
that. Well, the club's not now Richmond and Essendon with the really quality draft picks won't have them next year. So then it's just it's open, but it's probably imagine if he goes to Geelong. Imagine people losing their mind because he goes down to Geelong. The country boy goes to the country.
Generally, Paul Connor's clients, they do the next contract, don't they? They get to 5 or whatever before they potentially. I think they would want him to stick it out for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I just get a feeling maybe Harley thinks. I don't think he dislikes the West. He's not happy that they're not very good at the moment. But I think he'd get bigger money and more cred if he does 5-year stint. Then goes, I've done my stint, a bit like Chris Judd, not quite the same, and then comes for the blockbuster of all blockbuster deals.
So maybe a couple more years at Essendon, at West Coast, excuse me.
Because this year he hasn't played that well. He's got to rebuild himself. Because right now he's not the best player in that draft.
No, and there's clubs out there right now that are saying, 10 years at 20 million. Yeah. I'm not sure that he's actually worth that. Now, he's played better football the last couple of weeks. I read round 6, he was an 80% chance to ask for a trade. I reckon 10 weeks on, I reckon that's probably got down to 40%.
I reckon the management will be saying stay. That'd be my gut feel.
We'll wait for St Kilda to offer $2.5 million a year and really blow everyone else out of the water. Right, Johnny, Ralph, Scotty Gullan, you've been fantastic. My name is Jay Clark. Stick with Code Sports. We'll have all the latest Dealmaker series, our other videos, and of course our player agent survey. Always interesting stuff when we're talking player management and the big list moves on Code Sports.